July 12, 2024. Utah, a gated community in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, hidden behind high security fences where police are generally summoned for nothing worse than reports of loud music or a neighbor's dog barking excessively on the front lawn. Yet on this summer night, the quiet was broken by a barrage of thunderous gunfire. A frightened resident quickly contacted emergency services. When deputies went into the home, they encountered a troubling sight. On the entryway floor lay the blood-covered body of 42-year-old Matthew Rastelli. Nearby stood two individuals, the homeowner, Tracy Grist, Matthew's mother-in-law, and her son, Kevin Ellis, Matthew's brother-in-law. What immediately caught attention was their remarkable composure. There was no visible sign of fear, confusion, or urgency from either person, and that calm behavior would soon become one of the earliest reasons investigators questioned their account and looked more closely from the start. No hysteria, no trembling hands. They calmly assured the deputies that what had occurred was a brutal but entirely warranted act of self-defense. Tracy and Kevin claimed Matthew had unexpectedly barged into the home during the middle of the night. They said he had a knife and planned to hurt everyone inside. Kevin stated that he seized a gun to shield himself and his mother, then fired repeatedly to eliminate the danger. Before we begin tearing this case apart and uncovering what actually occurred, take a quick moment to support the channel. Press the like button, be sure you're subscribed, and post any comment below. It takes only a moment, yet it truly helps these investigations reach a wider audience and lets me continue producing fresh deep dives like this. Done. Great. Let's move on. Initially, the account Tracy and Kevin gave seemed convincing. An enraged relative, a domestic dispute, a desperate struggle to save innocent lives. Yet seasoned investigators noticed an entirely different picture as soon as they entered. After only minutes of inspecting the scene, Tracy and Kevin's official account was already starting to unravel. The deputies spotted details that simply didn't match the image of a violent break-in. First, they examined the front entrance. Do you know what this supposedly furious man who allegedly arrived to attack the family did before going inside? He deliberately removed his hiking sandals and carefully set them beside the wall so he wouldn't bring dirt across his mother-in-law's floors. Think about that for a moment. How often does someone supposedly preparing to launch an assault pause to worry about protecting another person's carpet while fueled by pure adrenaline? Personally, I've never encountered a contradiction quite this unusual. Yet the bizarre details continued. Investigators went outside to inspect Matthew's vehicle. It was an aging car with a major mechanical problem. The engine was leaking oil heavily. Beneath the engine, sitting on the immaculate driveway, was a neatly placed piece of cardboard. Investigators later discovered that Matthew had previously asked his wife to lay those sheets down for him. After arriving, he parked with remarkable care so the leaking oil would not stain Tracy's driveway, even during what would become the last minutes of his life. That was something he had deliberately remembered. You have to acknowledge how those small, ordinary details completely alter the picture. They lead to one conclusion. Matthew arrived there peacefully. Anyone concerned about keeping the floors and driveway clean isn't arriving prepared to begin a violent confrontation. The deputies traded looks. They were already beginning to understand that nobody inside that house had been protecting themselves from an assault. The instant Matthew Rastelli arrived at the front entrance, he was ambushed and shot. This was no spontaneous shooting carried out in self-defense, nor was it something that unfolded without warning. Someone had deliberately arranged the encounter. Yet establishing that fact and discovering why a devoted father had become his own relative's intended victim meant investigators first had to trace the story backward. To uncover the truth, we need to leave Utah and travel into neighboring California, taking a closer look at a profoundly unhealthy marriage. Greed, lies, and an overwhelming need for control would ultimately produce consequences that could never be undone. Understanding what drove this disturbing crime requires us to return several months to early 2024 and follow the journey from Utah into California. The story now moves to Awanga, a tiny and isolated community with fewer than 1,000 inhabitants. There, a secluded residence sits beside thick woodland. The closest neighbors are well over a mile distant, while wild turkeys and even mountain lions routinely wander freely across the property. That secluded property was where the Rastellis made their home together. Matt and Catherine, known simply as Kate to their relatives. The couple was raising 3 boys together under the same roof. Matt also had an older son from an earlier relationship, and he regularly spent time with him riding mountain bike trails. alongside the couple's two younger boys. Mountain biking was a major and deeply important part of Matt's life. He competed nationally, and according to everyone who knew him, was a father who built his life around his family. From the outside, everything appeared completely ideal. Behind the doors, however, frequent disputes had gradually become an ordinary part of daily life. Matt and Catherine were both extremely headstrong, and arguments could erupt about nearly anything. Yet beneath those similarities, they differed in one crucial and revealing respect. Matt was working relentlessly to preserve the marriage and hold the family together. Catherine, meanwhile, had already maintained a romantic involvement with another man for over a year. Meanwhile, Kate was carefully conducting a two-sided campaign. She remained in frequent communication with relatives in Utah and slowly portrayed Matt as volatile and threatening. She secretly captured their arguments on her phone, but the recordings themselves followed a clear and deliberate pattern. Kate would instigate the dispute, then forward her relatives only those portions in which Matt could be heard shouting, deliberately excluding what had occurred before the outburst. Eventually, her relatives became convinced that Matt was responsible, and in family group chats they mocked him with degrading nicknames and even changed his contact picture to the poop emoji. While reviewing the investigative records, one question immediately stood out to me. Why devote so much effort to turning your relatives against your husband when you already intend to leave him? The explanation begins taking shape inside a California divorce lawyer's office, where Catherine appeared in early 2024 for legal advice. There, she was confronted with an unpleasant legal reality. California's law on this point is straightforward. After parents separate, custody is typically divided 50-50. The attorney plainly told Catherine that she had no legal right to take her sons and move to Utah to live with her mother. There was only one significant exception available to her. She would need to persuade a court that credible evidence existed of continuing physical abuse. That was precisely why she needed to present herself as a terrified and vulnerable victim. Her financial situation was even more troubling and uncertain. She discovered that neither she nor Matt actually owned the expansive property or the isolated woodland home. Those properties belonged to Matt's parents instead. Catherine had no employment, no personal savings of her own, and depended largely on funds her mother routinely provided. A lawful divorce would leave her with nothing. The house would never become hers. Sole custody would not be hers either, and she could not legally take the boys out of California with her. Once Kate understood that the legal path could not deliver the outcome she wanted, she adopted far more sinister methods. When Matt went away on a trip, she waited, then discreetly brought in people to assist her. Catherine systematically cleared the residence, loading furniture and other valuables into a storage unit she had rented. Then she placed the couple's two younger sons in a rental car her mother had paid for and quietly departed California without telling Matt anything. When he finally returned, the house was completely vacant. His personal possessions had disappeared. He was separated from his sons and had no clue where his family had gone. Alone among the stripped walls, Matt had no idea that his wife's concealed departure was merely the very opening move in a carefully organized sequence of events. As Matt struggled to comprehend his shattered life in that empty California house, more than 600 meters away in Utah, an entirely separate plan was already developing. Catherine reached her mother Tracy Gree's home safely with the boys. Inside that residence, however, what had begun as a marital dispute was becoming preparation for a deliberate killing. To grasp how far this situation had escalated, we need to examine Tracy herself more closely. By almost every account, she possessed an exceptionally difficult temperament. Her own family openly characterized her as a woman who held a deep resentment toward men. Shaped by painful experiences from her past, she regarded nearly every man her daughters had dated with contempt. But even among them, her hostility toward Matt was especially pronounced. She did nothing to conceal it. Only months earlier, she had already phoned her son-in-law and issued explicit, unmistakable threats. Later, when Catherine attempted to reconcile the situation and asked her mother to apologize, Tracy responded with a statement that revealed her thinking completely. "I'm not apologizing to that coward. I'd rather drive 9 hours and choke him myself." With her daughter now back beneath her roof, Tracy assumed control, leaving behind a massive digital trail as she became intensely absorbed in one particular criminal case. The prosecution of Donna Aden, the American woman accused of arranging a contract killing targeting her daughter's former husband. Catherine's mother devoured one article after another about the nationally recognized case. She followed the details closely, paying particular attention to the circumstances surrounding the crime and the way investigators reconstructed the events. The case clearly held her attention, and her curiosity soon became much more focused and troubling than ordinary interest in a news story. What came next made that interest even more alarming. Soon her internet searches turned toward Utah's gun laws, especially the circumstances under which deadly force could legally be justified. Before long, she was also researching cemeteries across the local area. Do you know what might be the most disturbing part of this story? It isn't even the scheme itself. It's the sheer certainty these people appeared to have that nobody would ever catch them. In a time when almost every internet search creates a digital trail, they behaved as though their activity could never be connected back to them. Around this period, Tracy purchased an unusual tactical military-style knife online, obtaining what investigators would later consider an important prop in a planned self-defense story. But Tracy never intended to personally execute the scheme. She required another person to carry it out. And the ideal pawn was right in the adjoining room, Catherine's own brother, Kevin Ellis. At 30, Kevin had no employment. He had been battling severe clinical depression and depended almost completely upon financial assistance from his mother, sometimes asking her for money to fund his only genuine pastime, playing pool. Kevin felt like he was a burden. At one of the darkest moments of his life, he admitted openly to his family that he had been having thoughts of self-harm. Rather than pushing him toward immediate professional assistance, Tracy recognized his emotional fragility as something she could exploit. During a discussion with Catherine, she coldly proposed that if Kevin already felt his own future was meaningless, he should first handle his brother-in-law. From there, the two women began deliberately reshaping Kevin's perception of reality. Every day, they fed him frightening accounts, persuading him that Matt was an unpredictable and dangerous man who would soon travel to Utah and assault the family. A vulnerable, depressed man was slowly being turned into someone convinced that protecting his family had become his responsibility. But for the ambush to succeed, they had to know Matt's precise whereabouts at all times. Several days before leaving California, Catherine secretly placed an Apple AirTag, a small location tracking device, inside the trash compartment of Matt's vehicle. Once she reached Utah, she gave the rest of the family access to the tracker's location. Soon, they had transformed the tracking application into something resembling a warped reality show. On the digital map, they even swapped the ordinary vehicle symbol for a poop emoji. They repeatedly refreshed the application, watching every mile he drove in real time, completely unaware that his movements were under surveillance. The machinery was now moving. The trap stood ready. Every person understood their part. The conspirators needed only one last move. They had to persuade their intended victim to come directly to them. Then July 12, 2024 arrived. Catherine made the next and most crucial move in her scheme. She phoned the husband she had abandoned. Her voice sounded nothing like what Matt had heard during the previous months. The accusations had vanished. The emotional separation was gone. Instead, she told him that she still loved him. She said she had made a terrible mistake, wanted to repair their relationship, and hoped they could rescue their marriage. Only one seemingly minor problem stood between them and a reunion. Catherine told Matt that she had severely injured her ankle. She claimed she couldn't physically operate the pedals and could not drive the boys back to California. Instead, she asked him to travel to Utah and collect them. Matt was, naturally, delighted. He was prepared to leave immediately, but he offered a perfectly sensible alternative. He suggested buying her an airplane ticket or renting a reliable vehicle. The explanation was straightforward. His aging car was in awful shape. The engine leaked heavily, and driving nearly 600 meters across several states in that vehicle created a genuine possibility of breaking down somewhere along the highway. That's when Catherine became oddly insistent. She demanded that Matt come in his old car and nothing else. No airplane, no rental vehicle. Do you understand why she was so adamant? If Matt changed vehicles, the concealed AirTag would remain in California. The conspirators would immediately lose his location. They would be unable to follow his movements, and their carefully arranged timing would collapse. Eventually, Matt surrendered and accepted those strange conditions. A journey of almost 10 hours was waiting for him. During the entire drive, the two remained in continuous communication. Catherine continued easing his suspicions. She sent affectionate message after affectionate message, telling him how deeply she missed him and how excited she was about his arrival. Matt responded with equal warmth. He had been completely disarmed. He truly believed he was driving to reunite his family. His thoughts were so distant from anything suspicious that his leaking engine was the only issue genuinely troubling him during the journey. He even messaged Catherine himself, asking her to place several pieces of cardboard on the driveway outside Tracy's house before he arrived. He simply wanted to avoid leaving oil stains on another person's property. As Matt continued covering the miles, preparations for the final stage were already happening inside Tracy Gree's home. Catherine went upstairs to the room where her two younger sons were asleep. Worried they could awaken from the noise and wander downstairs at precisely the wrong moment, she gave them melatonin. The sleep aid was intended to ensure they remained asleep until morning. Meanwhile, downstairs on the first floor, Tracy arranged the scene. She methodically removed the toys scattered across the living room so nobody would accidentally stumble over them in the darkness. Then she lifted a thick blanket and carefully laid it across an expensive sofa. Consider what level of preparation investigators say this demonstrates. According to prosecutors, they were getting ready for someone to be shot. Yet simultaneously, they were concerned that blood could mark the furniture upholstery. Everything had been arranged. The preparation was complete. Each person knew their assignment. Kevin positioned himself beside the front door to strengthen his confidence and, investigators say, eliminate whatever hesitation remained. He used cocaine. A loaded pistol was already fastened around his waist. The lure had worked flawlessly. The intended victim was driving directly into the setup by himself. At 10:06 p.m., Matt arrived at the Utah house. The tracker concealed inside his vehicle transmitted his precise location, and everyone waiting indoors immediately knew he was there. Matt eased into the driveway, positioning his tires squarely over the cardboard sheets he had asked Catherine to place there. He had arrived to collect his family hopeful, honestly convinced they were finally going to reunite and make the long trip back to California together. Then he entered the gate code into the keypad. Catherine had provided those numbers earlier. She had also expressly told him to enter without knocking so he wouldn't disturb Tracy, who was allegedly sleeping. Matt rotated the doorknob and crossed the threshold. As soon as he stepped inside and stood upright, Kevin began shooting. Completely surprised, defenseless, and utterly stunned, Matt immediately understood that he had walked into an ambush. He frantically tried to turn and escape back outside. He was given no opportunity. Investigators determined that most of the bullets hit him from behind. He fell forward onto the entryway floor, landing on the rug immediately before the same sofa Tracy had deliberately covered with a thick blanket beforehand. At that exact moment upstairs, Matt's sons were still asleep. The melatonin Catherine had given them earlier had accomplished precisely what she intended. The boys never awakened, even with gunshots ringing through the house. Now consider one straightforward question. How would people normally respond after a truly spontaneous act of self-defense? Their bodies are flooded with adrenaline. They immediately contact emergency services. They panic. They attempt to provide assistance. They do everything possible to keep the wounded person alive, or at minimum, try to control the bleeding. Yet none of that happened here. Kevin, Tracy, and Catherine waited more than 1 minute or 5 minutes before seeking medical assistance. Prosecutors said they remained standing over their injured relative for 9 agonizing minutes, merely waiting for his heart to cease beating. The emergency call came only because something unexpected interrupted them. A neighbor who had heard the gunfire in the normally peaceful neighborhood texted Tracy to ask whether everything was all right. Only when Tracy realized the shots had drawn attention and could no longer remain concealed did she finally make the call. During that period of waiting, investigators say the crucial piece of staging occurred. Tracy took the tactical knife she had deliberately ordered online only days before and positioned it inside Matt's hand. The prosecution said the objective was both straightforward and calculated. Portray Matt as an unstable attacker and make the shooting appear to be justified self-defense. Yet actual forensic evidence is far less forgiving than the situations people picture after watching television crime dramas. The specialists who analyzed the evidence quickly tore apart the entire staged scene. Consider how unbelievable this appeared from a forensic perspective. Every detail of the self-defense account had to withstand close examination, from the victim's position to the weapon found in his possession. Instead, the physical evidence would expose how carefully the scene had been arranged before help was eventually requested. Tracy positioned the knife inside Matt's right hand. The central issue? Matt had been profoundly left-handed throughout his entire life. Under intense stress, people generally relied instinctively on their dominant hand. There was also another serious issue. The knife had been arranged with its blade pointing backward toward Matt's body. Physiologically, that is not a natural grip for a person supposedly preparing to attack. However, the most compelling and decisive evidence came directly from the medical examiner. One of Kevin's bullets had traveled completely through Matt's right wrist. His muscles and tendons were severely and critically damaged during the opening moments of the shooting itself. With an injury of that severity, maintaining a secure hold on a heavy object is physically impossible. Had Matt truly entered the house carrying that knife in his right hand, the weapon would have dropped to the floor almost immediately because of the trauma and involuntary muscular response. Investigators recorded each of those details at the scene. What was supposed to be a carefully crafted self-defense account rapidly fell apart, leaving investigators with what they considered unmistakable evidence of an intentional crime. As crime scene investigators downstairs documented Matt's wounded wrist, Catherine remained upstairs. The man she had been married to for 8 years had just been killed. You'd expect shock or grief. Instead, Catherine quietly opened Discord and began a video call with a close friend. She directed her phone's camera toward the entryway floor and showed her friend around. "Look, this is where he died." Her friend was reportedly speechless. Then, in the background, Tracy made a remark that made the situation even more disturbing. She said that had she known her friend liked dark or morbid things, she would have photographed the body. Reading those investigative reports, I couldn't believe the shocking degree of indifference they described so plainly. The following day, while Matt's body remained at the medical examiner's office, Catherine was preparing to go on a date with another man. Investigators found no searches for funeral arrangements in her browser history. Instead, they discovered searches such as, "How do you get rid of a hickey fast?" and "When should you tell a guy you love him?" They apparently believed law enforcement would view the case as simply Kevin using excessive force in self-defense, and that the story would end there. Instead, their digital trail became the basis for the case against them. Recovered text messages, the AirTag location history, cached records documenting the purchase of the tactical knife. The appearance of their perfect plan steadily fell apart piece by piece. In November 2024, Catherine and Tracy were both taken into custody. After they went behind bars, family loyalty vanished almost immediately. Catherine made a deal with prosecutors and turned against her own brother, the same Kevin she had helped manipulate through lies and persuaded to pull the trigger. She did so hoping for a lighter sentence. Kevin was convicted in connection with the crime and given a prison sentence. Tracy's case was separated and set for its own trial. The conclusion of this story is especially difficult to overlook. At the sentencing hearing, the judge publicly said Catherine had never genuinely acted in her son's best interests and had instead treated them as instruments of manipulation. She received a life sentence with the possibility of seeking parole after serving 6 years. Yet perhaps the sentence's most important element was something else. The court ordered an extraordinary restriction. Catherine was permanently barred from any contact with her sons, even through third parties. Complete and total isolation. The two boys were placed under the care of Matt's brother. Today, they are growing up in a secure environment, surrounded by family, including their grandmother, who endured an unimaginable loss when she lost her son. Catherine wanted complete control over everything. She wanted the assets. She wanted exclusive authority and was willing to disregard the law to obtain it. Ultimately, her greed cost her absolutely everything. Matt lost his life because he trusted his own family without question. But the truth about what happened to him never remained permanently concealed beneath that rug for long in. For 7 years, Carly Pierce Stevenson kept answering her phone. She sent texts back home to her mother. Her bank account stayed active and continued showing ordinary activity: fuel, groceries, cash withdrawals across 3 states. She had actually been dead all along. Her remains lay hidden in woodland south of Sydney, unidentified for years afterward, recorded only by one word printed on the shirt discovered beside them. And 750 meters away, inside a suitcase abandoned beside a highway, lay what remained of her 2-year-old daughter. Nobody was searching for either of them at all. Someone had seen to that. Alice Springs lies almost precisely at Australia's geographical center, a community of about 25,000 people encircled by 900 miles of red desert in every direction. To reach anywhere else, you drive an entire day or fly. That isolation shapes the people who grow up there. It leaves some of them. It leaves others eager to discover what lies beyond the ridgeline. Carly Jade Pierce Stevenson belonged to that second group. Born in 1988, she grew up in that town with her mother, Colleen, and stepfather, Scott Povey. Family photos from her teenage years show a slight young woman with dark hair pulled back, a broad, somewhat crooked smile, the sort of face that looked younger than the birth certificate. People who knew her remembered someone gentle by nature and easily influenced, quick to trust, quick to assume that someone offering help was simply someone offering help. It was not exactly naivety, not in the usual sense. It was a small-town instinct developed somewhere you knew the names of those at the next table. She left school before completing it. She moved through casual jobs. Money remained consistently scarce, and in her late teens, she had started shifting between addresses, staying with friends, returning home again. Colleen worried about the pattern, but not the person. Her daughter always returned. In June 2006, at 18, Carly gave birth to a daughter. She called her Condolis Kiara Pierce. The relationship with the child's father ended. By the time Condolis could walk, Carly was raising her by herself. Everyone around her agreed, friends, neighbors, and relatives who later talked to police, that becoming a mother completely redirected her attention. She was young, disorganized, constantly short of money, and utterly devoted to her daughter. Condolis was blonde, unlike her dark-haired mother, round-cheeked, noisy, and outgoing with strangers. She had recently begun joining words into sentences. She often narrated whatever she spotted through a car window. Colleen adored the girl. She was an old-fashioned grandmother, practical love expressed through things that required time and care to create. Sometime in 2007 or 2008, she sat down and hand-stitched a quilt for Condolis. Patchwork, distinctive, not a store-bought pattern, but her own design, sewn panel by panel in the front room of a house in Alice Springs. She could never have known that this blanket would eventually become the only object in the country capable of restoring her granddaughter's name to her. By mid-2008, Carly had decided to go. The reason for leaving was ordinary and straightforward. Alice Springs had no work she could get without qualifications and a toddler on her hip. Rent was expensive and difficult to manage. The days were long. She spoke about heading east, toward New South Wales, perhaps the coast, perhaps somewhere she could place Condolis in daycare and finally find stable work. Her mother disliked the idea. It was 1,800 meters of highway, mostly empty, and Carly owned no car and had no money for airfares. But Carly was 20 years old, and convinced that the remainder of her life was unfolding somewhere else. All she needed was a ride. During the final months of 2008, she found exactly that. A man had been moving around the outer edges of her social circle. Older, talkative, generous with rides, cash, and cigarettes. A man with a vehicle and no particular reason to remain anywhere. He was interested in her. He deliberately made himself helpful. He provided precisely what she was lacking. Colleen met him only briefly. For the next 4 years of her life, she would try to understand what had happened after her daughter climbed into his vehicle. Carly's family last saw her and Condolis alive in Alice Springs, sometime in late 2008. Mother and daughter climbed into a vehicle bound for the eastern states. Driving it was Daniel James Holt. Born in 1974, Daniel James Holt was 34 when he met Carly, 14 years her senior, and old enough for his interest in a 20-year-old to have raised an alarm with someone. It did not. He had a talent for appearing at moments when his presence seemed fortunate. Originally from New South Wales, he had reached his 30s without a permanent home that truly deserved the name. He moved around. He worked whenever employment appeared, then stopped whenever it vanished. His past relationships included women who often fit the same pattern: younger women, financially unstable, separated from relatives, raising children fathered by previous partners. He was not conventionally charming or polished. Heavy-set and ordinary-looking, he was the kind of man easily missed while standing in a service station line. Instead, he offered availability. He appeared when needed. He transported people. He covered expenses. He seemed dependable precisely because he was always available. And that apparent reliability mattered to Carly at the time. That was the impression he deliberately created around her too. For a young mother without transportation or savings, that behavior could look almost exactly like kindness. People who knew him well described another personality beneath the helpful exterior, controlling over minor matters, quick to become resentful, even quicker to make threats, and inclined to invent detailed accounts of his life and maintain them long after they stopped sounding believable. For years, he kept a partner named Hazel Passmore close to him. She would later become a crucial witness in the case and receive an immunity arrangement for the information she possessed about what Holday did afterward. Holday's involvement with Carly lasted only weeks, not months. Prosecutors would eventually call it a relationship. In reality, it was more like a convenient attachment that Hold rapidly turned into control. The process is simple, and it deserves to be stated directly because it forms the foundation of this entire case. He cut her off. Carly had already begun weakening her connections to Alice Springs. She had informed her family that she was going. She had asked them not to worry. Hold merely sped up a separation she had already initiated, then positioned himself as the sole constant in her new life. He controlled the car. He possessed the money. He knew the highways and she did not. After Alice Springs disappeared behind them, every basic necessity Carly required, food, fuel, somewhere to sleep, a road map, phone credit, came through one person, while Candace was with her, making her wary instead of confrontational. A woman alone can leave a dangerous situation at a truck stop. A mother carrying a toddler, without money or a ticket home, cannot. They traveled east during the closing months of 2008. No complete itinerary survives. The evidence comes from bank activity, mobile phone tower records reconstructed years afterward, and Holday's eventual statements. It forms a patchwork of service stations, cheap motels, and lengthy highway stretches across country where the next town may be an hour away, and nobody pays attention to anyone else. Carly remained in contact with her family during that time. She phoned her mother. She sent texts. Nothing she communicated indicated fear. Her voice sounded like that of a young woman on an adventure that was proving somewhat worse than promised. She was low on money, exhausted, but okay. Colleen felt reassured because her daughter was traveling with a man who owned a vehicle and appeared to be caring for them. By early December, they had reached New South Wales. One detail from this period would repeatedly draw investigators' attention after they finally grasped what they were examining. Holday took pictures. In 2008, people did not commonly take photographs without some reason. This was before mobile phones made photographs effortless and disposable. He carried a camera, retained the pictures, and preserved them for years afterward through several relocations and relationships instead of erasing them. Some images showed Candace, a living blonde 2-year-old in the bushland, playing without awareness. Other photographs came later. The court determined that Holday had not photographed Carly and her daughter through sentiment or coincidence. He took the photographs because they held value for him, because he meant to keep something. Around December 5, 2008, he left the Hume Highway about 90 meters south of Sydney, turning onto an unsealed track leading into a pine and eucalypt plantation that covered over 8,000 acres. Belanglo State Forest. Belanglo is not true wilderness. That is the first point to understand about the place. It is managed woodland, commercial pines planted in rows and divided by a network of gravel fire trails, broad enough for a 2-wheel drive sedan. During summer, the air beneath the canopy carries resin and heated dust. Sound acts strangely there. The plantation rows swallow it. A vehicle door shutting 40 yards away barely registers. You can drive deep into that forest and, for all practical purposes, be completely alone on the continent. Yet you can leave again in less than 15 minutes and reach a national highway. That isolation is why Holden went there. His choice was deliberate. The court later accepted that this had been a planned killing rather than an argument that suddenly escalated. He had taken Carly hundreds of miles away from everyone who knew her. He had chosen a site. He had brought a camera. What occurred in that forest was reconstructed from bone. Carly endured a prolonged violent sexual assault. Then he killed her. Skeletal remains recovered years later revealed fractures indicating tremendous force against the chest. The pattern created when someone is stomped upon or forced into the ground by a knee while lying on their back. Her throat had been crushed. She was 20 years old, weighed less than 110 pounds, and had no realistic ability to fight off a man of Holdham's size. Justice Robert Hume later characterized the killing as a crime of extreme gravity and appalling depravity, finding that Holday had violated her sadistically, treating her, in his words, as flesh whose life could be extinguished for his own pleasure. Then Hold did what set him apart from an ordinary murderer. He photographed her corpse. He intentionally arranged the photographs. He retained them. The sentencing judge described them as a vile trophy of his own inhumanity. They were evidence not of panic, but of someone who wanted a record of his actions and expected to view it again. Leaving her half naked among the pine litter, he returned to the vehicle and drove away from the forest. Candace remained inside. She was 2 and 2 years old. Her mother had disappeared, and she was now traveling with a man she had known for only weeks. For the next 4 days, Daniel Holder drove through southern New South Wales with the toddler in the back seat. This is the part of the case many people find hardest to absorb, in some ways more difficult than the forest, because it was not a single act of violence. It was 96 hours of mundane logistics, fuel stops, meals, nappies, a child asking for her mother using a vocabulary of perhaps 200 words while riding in a car with the windows open. He was visible in the December heat. People remembered seeing a man traveling with a little blonde girl. He already had an explanation, and he repeated it more than once. He was helping the family, driving the child across to South Australia and taking her to her grandmother. It was a convincing lie. It accounted for everything. The mother's absence, the direction they were heading, why a man like him was traveling with a child like her, and it was sufficiently close to the truth that a casual question at a petrol counter might never have exposed it. Carly's mother really did live interstate. Condolis really did have a grandmother waiting to see her. He continued taking photographs as well. Some images recovered later showed the little girl alive in bushland during the days following her mother's death, standing and looking toward the camera. He continued west. Somewhere along that route, he passed through Nandanda, a town of roughly 4 Diwid people on the Murmiji River, about 350 miles from Belanglo. Motels there were inexpensive and required little more than a name at the desk. The court determined that Condylis was killed there, probably inside one of those rooms. She was suffocated. Balls of dishcloth were pushed into her mouth. Tape was wrapped repeatedly across her face, beginning at the chin and moving upward over the eyes. A disposable nappy covered her head. Holt admitted in the agreed facts of his own case that he had intended or planned to sexually assault her. She was 2. He placed her body inside a suitcase, a hard-sided case of the kind sold in discount stores across the country. Into it, he placed her belongings there too: small dresses, a tutu, shoes, and the quilt. The patchwork blanket her grandmother had hand-sewn in Alice Springs went into that suitcase beside her. Holt almost certainly did not consider it at all. It was cloth. It belonged to her. It was inside the vehicle and had to disappear. He was clearing away a life the same way you empty a vehicle before selling it. Nothing remaining that links back to the previous owner. That choice, made inside some motel room by a hurried man, became the one mistake that eventually cost him his freedom. But that would not happen for another 7 years. He continued west, crossing the state border into South Australia, leaving New South Wales behind. The route took him farther west from Belanglo and farther from the people who knew Carly, while the suitcase remained with him as he traveled alone. Roughly 750 miles from the forest where Carly had been left, he traveled along the Karoonda Highway, a 2-lane road crossing the Murray-Molly, flat scrubland of wheat paddocks and low Malay gum, where traffic is sparse and the roadside verges are broad and unmown. Near Winarka, a settlement with a railway siding, a few houses and little else, he stopped and placed the suitcase in the tall grass beside the road. Then he drove on. By then, he had separated mother and daughter across 3 states and 1,100 kilometers of highway. Neither carried identification. Neither had been reported missing because their family believed they were somewhere on the East Coast, settling into their new life. 2 people had effectively disappeared, and no one had noticed. For most murderers, this marks the end of the process. You hide the victims, then you hide yourself. New town, new identity, no connection to anything tied to the crime. Holt did the reverse. He still possessed Carly's mobile phone. He still had her bank card. He knew her PIN, her birth date, her mother's name, the names of her friends. In practical terms, he had inherited an identity that nobody had any reason to believe was empty. And during the years that followed, he exploited it. The messages began almost at once. Carly's phone remained active. It continued receiving messages and sending replies. Brief texts to her mother, her stepfather, her friends. She was okay. She was busy. Condolis was doing well. Money was difficult. She would call when possible. The wording stayed vague enough to withstand questions and affectionate enough to end them. Colleen Povey read those messages in Alice Springs and had absolutely no reason to question them. Her daughter had always been an inconsistent communicator. Extended silences followed by sudden contact were simply normal for their relationship. The bank account continued moving as well. Carly received government benefits, the ordinary assistance available to a single mother in Australia. Those payments continued after her death because nobody had informed anyone that she was dead. They built up. They were withdrawn. During the following years, approximately $72, Zuzu disappeared from accounts belonging to a woman whose body lay in a New South Wales pine plantation. Withdrawals occurred across state borders in everyday towns, at ordinary counters, made by people supplying the correct information. Holden was not acting alone. Hazel Passmore, the woman who had remained around him for years, helped exploit Carly's identity and was eventually given immunity in return for giving evidence about it. Some of the money paid for forgettable things. Fuel, rent, groceries, that is what remains disturbing afterward. 2 human lives were reduced to a gradual stream of ordinary household spending. By 2009, Colleen's patience had finally run out. The messages were becoming less frequent. The calls had ceased. She had not heard her daughter's real voice for months. She had also never heard her granddaughter speaking somewhere in the background. She went to Northern Territory Police and reported Carly and Candace missing. Investigators opened a file, and then a message arrived. It came from Carly's phone number. In substance, it said she was fine, living her own life, did not want anyone following her, and wanted everyone to stop. Police responded as they normally would when an adult apparently chooses to sever contact and confirms that decision in writing. The report was withdrawn, and the investigation was closed. Hold had murdered them both, left their bodies 1,000 kilometers apart, then, from behind a keypad, ended the only official search that was ever likely to be conducted for them. Colleen believed it because the alternative was impossible to bear. Her daughter was angry with her. That could be endured. It meant she was still alive. Consider what that did to the family during the next 3 years. There was no mourning because there was no confirmed death. There was no outrage because there was no known crime. There was simply a gradual, corrosive uncertainty. Birthdays came and went without a call. Christmases passed while the telephone remained silent. A grandmother purchased presents for a child she had no way to send them to. Relatives began forming their own explanations. Carly had fallen among bad people. Carly felt ashamed about something. Carly was deliberately punishing them. Around Alice Springs, the stories spread as they do in communities that size, not as sensational gossip, but as a quiet, accepted background truth. That girl who left never returned and does not speak to her mother. A community had slowly concluded that a murdered 20-year-old was merely a difficult daughter. In 2011, Colleen received a cancer diagnosis. She spent her remaining time doing the only thing she could, asking questions, calling the number, asking mutual acquaintances whether anyone had seen them along the coast, assuring anyone willing to listen that Carly would eventually return. She died in 2012. Her husband, Scott Povey, held her hand beside her. Years later, in a Sydney courtroom, he described what her final coherent sentence had been. Several hours before she stopped breathing, she asked if Carly and Candace had arrived yet. He said that at that moment, he understood they were never coming. Colleen Povey was buried without ever discovering that her daughter had been dead for 4 years. Her granddaughter had been dead for 4 years and 4 days, or that the quilt she had sewn by hand was sitting inside a suitcase in grass beside a South Australian highway, 1,300 meters from her front door, waiting to reveal the answer she had spent the remainder of her life searching for. On 29 August 2010, 2 trail bike riders left a fire trail in Belanglo State Forest and stopped where the pines opened into scrub. Bones lay among the leaf litter, neither buried nor hidden beneath rocks or timber, scattered over a small patch by 20 months of weather and animals. Sunlight had bleached the exposed pieces, while those resting in the mulch were dark. A skull, ribs, long leg bones, some separated by yards. The riders stepped back, reported what they had found, and within hours the forest was shut, while forensic specialists examined the ground on hands and knees. Almost nothing remained. The recovery left investigators with fragments rather than a recognizable person, and every ordinary means of identification appeared to have been stripped away. There was no obvious personal property, no document, and no living tissue capable of answering the basic questions. The forest had preserved the bones, but it had not preserved the woman's identity, and that absence would shape everything that followed for years afterward. Leave investigators searching without a name. A young woman. Her growth plates placed her between 18 and 30. She was small, around 5'2". There was no wallet, keys, phone, jewelry, or distinctive dental work that could be compared with a chart. Too little soft tissue remained to establish a cause of death through ordinary examination. Only her skeleton could provide answers. It showed massive blunt trauma to the chest and injuries consistent with a crushed throat. Nearby lay clothing, ordinary garments, cheap, mass-produced. One piece carried a printed word, angelic. Police had no name for her, and unidentified cases need names. When authorities appealed publicly for assistance, they called her Angel. The media shortened that description. She became the Angel of Belanglo, the only identity attached to her for the next 5 years. The investigation immediately moved in the wrong direction, though not because investigators were incompetent. Belanglo already had a reputation. Bodies had been discovered there during the early 90s in a case that had dominated front pages across Australia. When skeletal remains appeared beneath those pines again, every New South Wales reporter reached the same conclusion. That theory controlled coverage for weeks. Forensic examination eventually destroyed it. The condition of the remains and the surrounding earth showed that this body had been left there long after the man responsible for those earlier murders was already serving life. Whoever she was, she had died recently, within the previous 2 or 3 years. By then, however, the assumption had caused damage. Public interest had settled on a closed story, leaving the real question, who is she, with almost no attention. A second theory seemed more sensible, yet proved equally wrong. Belanglo lies beside the Hume Highway. Young women disappearing near major intercity roads are statistically often travelers. Investigators therefore assumed she was a backpacker or hitchhiker, perhaps foreign, perhaps someone whose disappearance would be noticed gradually or only overseas. They checked her against missing persons databases across Australia and abroad. Nothing matched. It could not match because she was not absent from those lists, because she was foreign or transient. She was missing because a text sent from her own phone had convinced police in another jurisdiction to close her file 18 months earlier. Every search presumed that some family was still looking. Her family had already been told to stop. In 2011, forensic artists created a facial reconstruction, a clay and computer approximation formed from the skull's contours. Police circulated it nationwide. A young woman with dark hair, a neutral expression, and that slightly unreal quality facial reconstructions always possess. Calls followed. None produced an answer. Nobody in Alice Springs recognized her, or if they saw the image, they failed to connect an unfamiliar reconstructed face with a girl who had apparently chosen to stop speaking with her mother. By 2012, the investigation was cold. By 2013, it was another unidentified remains case in a country containing hundreds. The forest reopened. Trail bikes returned. She remained on a shelf inside a box, cataloged under a word taken from a t-shirt. 5 years passed, while roughly 750 miles west, in grass beside a South Australian highway, a suitcase endured 5 summers and 5 winters. Sun damaged the fabric, seams opened, and the case gradually collapsed around what it contained until a driver slowed to inspect it. On 15th July 2015, during midwinter in South Australia, the Karoonda Highway ran east from the Adelaide Hills into flat, pale country. Wheat stubble, low malscrub and fence lines, sky. A motorist traveling through Winnerka spotted something lying in grass along the verge. It was a weathered, hard-shelled suitcase, partly swallowed by roadside vegetation. People encountered roadside dumping constantly. Sometimes there was something worth taking. He stepped out and opened it. Inside were children's clothes, little dresses, a tutu, toddler-sized shoes, and among the brittle brown fabric were bones. He contacted police, and by that afternoon, a section of the Karoonda Highway had been closed and covered with tents. The remains belonged to a very young girl. Her skeleton indicated an age somewhere between 2 and 4 years. She had remained inside that suitcase for a long time, not months, but years. Investigators quickly concluded that she had suffered a violent death long before her body was abandoned beside the road. What remained on her showed how. Compacted balls of dishcloth in the mouth, layers of tape wound around the skull from beneath the chin upward across the eye sockets, and a disposable nappy around the head. She had not died from neglect or illness. Someone had held her face and acted deliberately. She had no name either. Australia now had 2 unidentified victims. A woman beneath the New South Wales pines, a child in the South Australian Mallee, with no apparent reason connecting them for several months. South Australian police made a decision that would determine the case. They could not publish a face. There was no face remaining to reconstruct. Even if one had survived, the features of a 2-year-old changed too rapidly to remain recognizable years later. Instead, they released the suitcase's contents, photographs of the clothing, the tutu, the little dresses, and a handmade patchwork quilt, not a commercial pattern, but an arrangement someone had designed themselves, panel by panel, sewn at a kitchen table. Police placed the image on news bulletins nationwide and asked one question: does anyone recognize this blanket? It was an unusual appeal, and it succeeded in an unusual manner. A child's photograph is passive. You study it and either recognize the face or you do not. A picture of a hand-sewn object is different. It prompts the viewer to remember creating something. It encourages families to consider their own aunts, grandmothers, and front rooms. More than 200 calls reached Crime Stoppers. Most amounted to nothing. Misidentified quilts, sincere guesses, old grief becoming attached to a new case. Then in October, one caller provided something specific. They believed the quilt had been sewn by a woman in Alice Springs. That woman had died from cancer in 2012. She had made it for her granddaughter, a little blonde girl named Candace, who had left the Northern Territory with her mother in 2008 and never returned. The family had been told that the mother wanted no contact. The caller supplied a name for the child inside the suitcase and a name for the mother nobody had been searching for. DNA moved quickly after that. Relatives supplied samples. On October 20th, 2015, the remains recovered from the suitcase were identified as Candace Kiara Pierce, who had been 2.5 years old when she died. That discovery immediately raised the obvious question: where had her mother gone? Investigators began searching for Carly Pierce Stevenson's DNA and located it somewhere unexpected. An old medical file contained a blood sample collected years earlier, before she had ever left Alice Springs. They compared it against the National Database of Unidentified Remains. On October 21st, 2015, just one day after the child received her name, the Angel of Belanglo received hers too. The woman beneath the pines was the mother of the little girl inside the suitcase. 2 cases, 2 states, 5 years apart, were solved within 24 hours of each other because of a blanket. The combined investigation moved quickly because the answer had been sitting openly in front of investigators since 2008. One individual had left Alice Springs with them. One individual had continued using Carly's phone. One individual had fingerprints throughout $72,000 in withdrawals from a deceased woman's account. On October 28, 2015, 1 week after the identifications, police arrested Daniel James Holday in Cessnock, in New South Wales Hunter Valley, and charged him with Carly Pierce Stevenson's murder. He was 41. On December 15th, after South Australian and New South Wales detectives had assembled the mobile data, financial records, and witness statements, he was also charged with murdering Candace. Investigators then examined what he had preserved. They discovered the photographs. Holt resisted the allegations for nearly 3 years. He denied responsibility for both murders. He provided alternative explanations. He accused other people. Meanwhile, he waited as the Crown built its case from phone tower evidence, banking records, Hazel Passmore's testimony under her immunity agreement, and photographs he had never managed to delete. On July 31st, 2018, only 1 week before his trial was scheduled to start, he entered guilty pleas to both murders. Sentencing took place on November 30th, 2018, in the Supreme Court of New South Wales. The courtroom was packed. Justice Robert Allen Hume determined that the crimes represented a very grave heinousness. Regarding Carly, he said Holday had demonstrated total contempt for her existence as a human being, treating her as flesh with a life that could be extinguished for his own pleasure. He called the photographs a trophy of the man's inhumanity. He also emphasized the cruelty that came afterward, the messages sent to a mother nearing death, the deception carried out against a daughter who was already dead. Regarding Candace, he chose one word: despicable. A completely defenseless child murdered 4 days after her mother by a man who admitted he had intended to assault her. That morning, Holt tried to retract his guilty plea to the child's murder. After a short adjournment, the application was denied. 2 life sentences with no parole. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. His later appeal, claiming the sentences were excessive, changed nothing. People in the public gallery applauded. Scott Povey had already explained to the court what the case had cost his family, how his wife had spent her final years believing her daughter had abandoned her, and how, only hours before dying, she had asked whether Carly and Candace had arrived yet. Carly and her daughter were taken back to Alice Springs and buried together close to Colleen. Every system intended to detect a missing person failed in this case. A police report was ended by a text message. A nationwide appeal using a reconstructed face achieved nothing. 5 years of forensic investigation had failed to attach a name to a skeleton. What finally solved it was a woman sitting at a kitchen table in the desert, sewing a blanket for a granddaughter, never knowing she was creating the only evidence that would ultimately matter. Holt discarded it inside the suitcase because he considered it rubbish. It became the object that identified them both. Today, we head to Windsor, Wisconsin, a village in Dane County just north of Madison. Windsor belongs to a growing part of southern Wisconsin known for its homes, parks, and close access to Madison. In this seemingly normal suburban community, the Halderson family lived. At first, nothing seemed unusual about them. Bart and Krista Halderson were a lovely couple known and loved in their community. On July 7, 2021, 23-year-old Chandler Halderson reported his parents, Bart and Krista Halderson, missing from their Dane County, Wisconsin home. Days had passed since he last saw or heard from them. To Dane County detectives, the case looked like a routine missing person case. A devoted mother and father of two had vanished during a weekend trip. Their second son, Chandler, said they had taken a last-minute 4th of July weekend trip to the family cabin and never returned. Yet the account began falling apart pretty fast. Cabin neighbors said the couple never arrived. There was no sign they went north to White Lake, Wisconsin, where the cabin was. The two sons did what they could, with Chandler going to neighbors asking if their doorbell cameras caught anything. It would take a few weeks to find Bart Halderson's dismembered torso. It was more puzzling as his wife was still missing, until a tip led them to partial remains of Christ Halderson in a remote wooded marshland in the town of Roxbury, Wisconsin. With 0 witnesses, detectives tore apart the Halderson home, following every tiny lead. In the family's digital trail, they found something chilling. There were layers upon layers of lies, deleted messages, and an unusual spike in the use of the home's fireplace. Piece by piece, the real story started to come together, and it was nothing like the one detectives were told. Bart Ashley Halderson was born on May 14, 1971 in Spohn, Wisconsin, a lakefront city, the son of Blake and Cain Halderson. He grew up in the small town of Valders and graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He became an accountant who helped small businesses sort out their taxes. He also worked for BDO USA, a national tax and accounting firm, climbing steadily through the ranks over the years. That job takes patience, care, a real want to help people through the parts of life they find most confusing. Bart didn't have to fake any of that. It was just who he was. Everyone who knew him said the same basic thing in different words. He was a man who showed up. His wife, Krista Ray Halderson, was born in 1968. When her boys were little, she stayed home with them full-time, giving them all her time and attention. When they got older, she went back to work in customer service at Zimbrek Automotive in Madison. She was the kind of person who made a workplace feel warm and bubbly. Her co-workers loved her for it. She was always punctual. If Krista was going to be even 5 minutes late, she said a text first every time. Bart and Krista married in 1994, nearly 29 years of a life they built together, one piece at a time. Their Windsor home, a small village about 20 miles north of Madison, was warm and settled. They also had a cabin up north in White Lake, Langlade County, the kind of place a family goes to get away for a weekend, breathe different air, forget about work for a bit. Their sons were Mitchell, the older one, worked in it and was engaged to be married, and Chandler, the younger son, had just turned 23 and a very good career lined up for him. He worked remotely for American Family Insurance to earn money while in school. He had also recently been hired by Elon Musk's aerospace company SpaceX as a remote specialist. He was moving to Titusville, Florida, and was already renting an apartment suite near the launch pad. What more could a kid ask for at that age? What detectives eventually pieced together painted a picture of a household that from the outside looked like precisely what it appeared to be. A normal family, a modest home, an ordinary Wisconsin summer. Krista was last seen at Zimbrek Automotive on Tuesday, June 29, 2021. She clocked in, worked her shift, went home. Bart had been working remotely that week. A family member saw him at the house on June 30th. On Wednesday, July 1st, around 2:00 p.m., Bart sent his son a text, "I'm ready whenever you are." It was the last message Bart Halderson would ever send. On the morning of July 7th, 2021, Chandler Halderson walked into a Dane County police station and told them his parents were missing. He said that on Friday, July 2nd, some couple, people he didn't really know, couldn't name, nothing, picked up Bart and Krista and drove them north to the family's cabin in White Lake for the holiday weekend. Since then, no contact, totally silent. Patrol deputies took his report and called it in. Officers in Langlade County went to check the cabin, but ran into Chandler's brother, Mitchell, and his fiancée just as they got there.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Are you guys,
The Halderson?
you are affiliated with them?
Yes.
Maybe we could just take a walk around and see. You would know the property probably better than we would.
Everyone searched side by side. The place stood empty. Meanwhile, back in Windsor, Chandler went from door to door, asking neighbors whether their cameras had captured anything that could help investigators. Detectives Sims and Shunk took over the investigation. Their first destination was the family residence on Oker Circle Drive. Chandler answered the door. The house seemed normal, nothing suspicious. Everything was tidy, fairly ordinary. Chandler showed them what belongings belonging to his parents were gone. Supposedly, those were the things they'd packed for the cabin trip. His account matched, at least outwardly. Yet as Sims and Chunk searched the house alongside Chandler, additional officers began speaking with neighbors and friends. They were reviewing the family's previous week, searching for any clue that could explain what had occurred. The problem was, the accounts they collected began unraveling. The earliest discrepancy was small. On July 2nd morning, a neighbor stopped by the house. Chandler said his parents had already departed for the cabin, but neighborhood doorbell cameras showed no sign of anything similar. No packing, no car being loaded, barely any activity whatsoever for a holiday escape. Then the situation became stranger. Chandler talked about a mysterious couple who supposedly collected his parents. Yet nobody, not one friend or relative, had ever heard of them. Nobody else knew about any cabin trip. Nothing. Bart and Krista's phones, meanwhile, never left Dane County. Not Friday, not the following day, not at any point. Also, Krista never called work to request time off. She wasn't scheduled to have July 1 or July 5 off. Krista's friend and coworker, Daniel Kroninger, grew concerned. Bad feeling. On July 2nd, he drove to the Windsor residence to check things himself. He knocked. Chandler opened the door. They spoke outside. Chandler wore a bandage over his foot. He said he'd injured himself while playing with the family dogs, something involving fireplace glass. When Daniel asked about Bart and Krista, Chandler said they were at the cabin. No problem. During the next several days, Daniel continued pressing Chandler to report them missing. As Sims and Shunk continued interviewing witnesses, other officers began examining phone records. Then a major break emerged. Chandler's girlfriend, Catherine Melander. She had spent the prior weekend with Chandler and initially said he appeared completely normal. At first, the entire scene gave investigators no obvious reason for immediate concern.
You don't think he had anything to do with his mom and dad being unheard from?
No. No. That'd be crazy. But I just don't see him killing Mr. and Mrs. Halderson. Like, he had SpaceX. Like, why would he jeopardize something he, would dream of, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there's parents.
There were, parents. Yet as she explained more, she revealed something unusual to detectives. A Snapchat screenshot displayed Chandler's live location more than 40 miles away from his home. Chandler had cheated before, so Catherine kept his live location on her phone, allowing her to check in, something they had both agreed upon to rebuild trust. Suddenly, that detail seemed significant. Detectives began assembling a timeline. On July 1, around 2 p.m., Bart sent Chandler a text from the house. It became the last message anyone knew had come from Bart. That night, messages began leaving Bart and Krista's phones for family members. The text made it seem as though everything was normal, and the couple was headed toward the cabin. Police soon determined, however, that Chandler had written those messages, not his parents. On July 2nd, Krista failed to appear at work. No call, no explanation. On July 3rd, Catherine got another Snapchat location update from Chandler. This time, it put him near the Wisconsin River around Roxbury, far from the route. The location was close to a place where Chandler had swum as a child. Catherine kept a screenshot. She found it strange. Then, on July 5th, a witness near Cottage Grove, 10 miles east of Windsor, noticed something unusual. A young man reversing a car with its hatch open beside a wooded field. That wasn't somewhere he would pass through on his way to White Lake. Finally, on July 7th, Chandler entered the precinct and filed the report. By that point, cell phone records had already made the situation clear. Bart and Krista's phones had never left the Windsor area. Their vehicles hadn't moved. The cabin trip had never taken place, regardless of what Chandler claimed. So where were Bart and Krista? That remained the question, and nobody had an answer yet. Following the July 5th tip, detectives traced the property to a rural farm in Cottage Grove. It belonged to the Melinder family, his girlfriend's family. They received permission to search. In a field near the tree line, they discovered something horrifying, a human torso. Nearby, an oil drum on the property contained a blade, a pair of scissors, and a handheld saw. The remains were sent for identification. They returned confirmed as Bart Halderson. The autopsy revealed at least 3 gunshot wounds to his torso, including one fired from close range into his back before he was dismembered. A shell casing was found in the basement of the house on Oker Circle Drive. Several areas of that basement tested positive for blood. Within a morning, the case had ceased being a missing persons investigation. But Chandler didn't know that yet. On July 8th, he sat through an interview, still believing he was helping detectives locate his parents.
Listen to me. This is the only chance you're going to have to tell us the truth. Okay. Listen. I can't tell you what we know, but we know you're not telling us the truth. You need to tell the truth. Listen. You need to tell the truth about what happened and just tell us why it happened. I'm not BSing you. Okay? So can we do that?
Okay. The arrest was based on him providing false information in regards to a missing person.
With Chandler in custody, investigators began tracing every lead they could uncover in his recent past. What emerged wasn't a history of violence. It was something completely different, and in certain ways it revealed even more. For at least 2 years before July 2021, Chandler had been living almost his entire existence within a fabricated world. Remember the career I mentioned he supposedly had? Every bit of it was false. American Family Insurance had no record that he'd ever worked there. None whatsoever. Even Spakes had no record of Chandler ever applying for a position. To prevent the story from falling apart, he constructed additional lies over the original ones. He created fake email identities, invented administrators and advisors at MATC, then used them to contact his parents so the college story would continue seeming legitimate. And when it became clear that he couldn't actually leave for a non-existent job, he claimed he'd sustained a serious concussion after falling down a flight of stairs, along with a brain bleed, hematoma, nerve damage, and spinal injuries. He said he was unable to fly. He began wearing a neck brace. He was tangled inside an incredible web of lies. It's easy to label this simply a story about pathological lying and stop there. But that overlooks something important about how those lies were built. The stories Chandler told his parents were never secure. Every lie required 2 more lies just to keep it standing. By the summer of 2021, the entire deception had become massive. Fake employers, fake job offers, fake injuries, fake email addresses representing imaginary people. How can anyone maintain something like that for 2 years without eventually cracking? You can't. Not really. You simply keep piling additional weight onto something that was already close to collapsing. But here's the truly striking part. It's not merely that he lied. It's that nowhere in the records investigators uncovered did he appear to seriously consider choosing the truth instead. No conversation, no text, not even a journal entry where he weighed that possibility. He wasn't scared of disappointing his parents. Instead, it seemed more like he feared existing within a reality he couldn't control. Bart became the spark that started everything. Prosecutors would later establish that. In late June 2021, Bart picked up the phone and personally called Madison Area Technical College. He wanted to speak with the advisors his son, Chandler, claimed he'd been working with. The call was recorded.
Sir, I don't see that you were admitted in any program.
You said they were, the IT degree is in there, right?
No, those are just classes. You might have just took the classes but not be in the program.
Bart discovered that his son had been dishonest from the beginning, and he didn't simply let it go. Bart arranged a meeting for July 1, 2021, wrote it down, and told Chandler they would attend together. That afternoon, while sitting at home, Bart texted Chandler, "I'm ready whenever you are." By the time Chandler was in custody, already charged in connection with his father's death, Krista remained missing. Investigators had no idea where she could be, or whether she was still alive. Then someone recalled the screenshot. Chandler's girlfriend, Catherine Melinder, had surrendered her phone, and she'd given detectives access to her Snapchat location history. One screenshot dated July 3rd placed Chandler along the Wisconsin River near Roxbury, in a remote area not far from a swimming spot he'd known since childhood. Investigators searched there. On July 14, 2021, they discovered human remains near the Wisconsin State Lure Riverway. They were identified as Krista Halderson. The remains were badly damaged, making the precise cause of death impossible to determine. But prosecutors were confident about what had occurred. Bart returned home for that meeting. Chandler was waiting. That's when Bart was killed. Krista returned afterward. She likely realized something was wrong as soon as she entered. She never had the opportunity to call for assistance. The Halderson family home on Oker Circle Drive contained nearly every piece of the story. Following July 1st, Chandler worked to conceal everything. He cleaned, divided, and discarded his parents' remains throughout southern Wisconsin. He also sent fraudulent messages from their phones to maintain the deception. He even developed a detailed account of a cabin trip, enough specifics to make people accept it. He almost succeeded. Chandler Halderson's trial began in Dane County Serpent Court on January 4, 2022. He pleaded not guilty to all 8 charges, 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, 2 counts each of mutilating and hiding a corpse, and 2 counts of providing false information concerning a missing person. During opening statements, Deputy District Attorney William Brown explained to jurors how extensive Chandler's deception had become. Chandler convinced everyone, his family, his girlfriend, that he was pursuing a college degree, preparing for an insurance career, with a major position waiting at SpaceX in Florida. Brown said none of it existed. Chandler created an incredible web of lies. This was only one small piece of the puzzle. During execution of the search warrant at the Halderson residence, investigators and forensic specialists discovered horrifying evidence inside and around the family room fireplace. Prosecutors established that Chandler Halderson tried to burn and dispose of his parents' remains there, explaining the flickering fire captured by the neighbor's security camera. Investigators recovered enough burned bone fragments to fill a dozen containers. They were discovered inside the primary fireplace cavity, on the grate, and within the basement ash trap. The recovered fragments were extensively burned and deteriorated, yet were anatomically consistent with human skull pieces, jaw fragments, facial bones, fingers, and kneecaps. The defense called no witnesses. They presented no alternative account of events. Chandler didn't testify either. Prosecutors spent 9 days presenting their case. Cell phone records established that Bart and Krista's phones never left Dane County, despite Chandler's claims. Snapchat placed him beside the Wisconsin River on July 3rd. Police discovered a shell casing in the basement and blood in several areas throughout the home. Bart's torso was found at the Melinder family farm. Krista's remains were discovered near the river outside Roxbury. There was another final piece that surfaced later. That October, months following the initial search, the owner of the Melinder farm was clearing a shed when he discovered a rifle hidden behind a woodpile. It was an SKS-style semi-automatic, the same firearm a friend had given Chandler in June, together with nearly 500 rounds of ammunition. A firearms specialist matched the serial number to Chandler's gift and connected the spent basement casing to that rifle. Investigators identified it as the murder weapon. It had been sitting there all along. Ultimately, the jury needed little time, just over 2 hours. On January 20th, 2022, the 4-person read the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
Guilty, all 8 counts. Chandler showed no flinch, gave no reaction whatsoever. On March 17th, 2022, Dane County Circuit Court Judge John Hyland sentenced Chandler Halderson to life behind bars without any chance of parole. I have to ensure through this sentence that the only time Mr. Halderson returns to the community is to receive the privilege of a burial he denied his parents, Judge Hyland said. Chandler's sole statement to the court was an announcement that he planned to appeal. He asked whether any lawyers listening might be willing to handle the case.
I want to take this opportunity to state my intent to appeal my convictions. If there are any lawyers listening and willing to take on my appeal, take a moment to please reach out to me. It's not that I do not have feelings, it's that I was warned to not show them due to the scrutiny of this case. Thank you.
In April 2023, 2 lesser convictions, those connected to concealing the remains, were overturned because of a legal technicality. His sentence remained unchanged. Then, in November 2025, a Wisconsin appeals court affirmed the conviction in its entirety. He remains incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. The punishment remains life without parole. That is the appropriate sentence. Yet there is something worth considering in the distance between what a court can provide a family and what that family truly needs. A judge can impose a sentence. What a judge cannot do is answer the question of why. Chandler Halderson has never provided one, not to investigators, not during sentencing, nowhere in the record since. The prosecution's account makes sense, and it is almost certainly correct. His lies were nearing collapse, and he chose murder rather than being exposed. But the Halderson family has never received even an admission, an explanation, or a moment when their son, their brother, looked at them and offered anything resembling accountability. A life sentence resolves the legal matter. It does not resolve the question this family continues to live with. Bart and Krista Holderson were later laid to rest at Roselawn Memorial Park in Monona, Wisconsin. When the offender behind a high-profile crime remains unidentified and free, it often generates widespread fear and sends shockwaves across the community. Residents remain frightened that another incident could happen, with no way of knowing when or where it might take place. For families and neighbors alike, that uncertainty can linger for months or years, leaving ordinary routines overshadowed by anxiety, suspicion, and the persistent fear that another attack could happen again. In smaller communities, such terrible violations of the law can become part of local folklore. Yet sometimes the investigation and seriousness of the offense lead to precedent-setting changes within the justice system, including new legislation or revisions to existing laws. More than 20 years ago, a young college student named Katie Sepich became the victim of a deeply disturbing assault in the quiet town of Las Cruces, New Mexico. Even today, it stands among the most frightening and bloody incidents in the city's history. Although the crime itself may have been solved quickly, completing the investigation took years because of major delays caused by failures within the justice system. Real progress came only after Katie's grieving family stepped forward and pressed for reform. Their efforts eventually led to a statute, named in her honor, requiring DNA samples from anyone detained in connection with violent or aggressive conduct. The crucial measure aimed to repair weaknesses in the system and prevent future delays when authorities tried to identify offenders. Catherine Jenna Sepich, known simply as Katie to her friends, was born on July 18, 1981, in the Las Cruces suburbs of Dona Ana County, New Mexico. As the oldest of 3 children, she was raised alongside her younger brother and sister in a warm, tightly bonded household. Katie shared a strong connection with both of them. Education was a priority for her parents. They urged each child to uncover and strengthen their individual talents while remaining committed to teaching them firm values. Katie excelled academically and ranked among the strongest students in her class. Drawn naturally toward science, she began considering an economics degree at New Mexico State University as graduation approached. Her parents were thrilled when Katie shared her decision, both because she was ambitious and because the Las Cruces University was nearby, meaning she could visit home often. Instead of living in the dormitories, Katie chose to rent a small apartment with a close friend. The apartment occupied the ground floor of a residential complex. Their college was just a 10-minute walk away, and each woman had her own bedroom. During her junior year, Katie met fellow student Joshua Bischoff, whom his friends called Joe. He was 1 year older than Katie and studied biochemistry at the same university. A connection formed between them almost immediately. Within months, they had brought each other home to meet their families, who warmly supported the relationship as it developed quickly. Joe had been born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico's capital. He planned to return there after graduation and work for his family's company. Because Katie still had a year left before completing her degree, the couple expected to face a long-distance relationship for a while. But just before they left town, Joe proposed, and Katie gladly accepted the beautiful custom-made diamond ring he presented to her. Their plan was simple. Once Katie graduated, they would marry and move to Albuquerque to live together. Since Joe had relocated to another city, they could see each other only during vacations. Still, the separation did not stop their daily communication. They kept in touch this way for nearly an entire year. In late August 2003, Joe returned to Las Cruces for Labor Day weekend with his fiancée. He stayed at the apartment Katie continued sharing with her friends. The living arrangement was comfortable, and nobody felt as though they were intruding because every roommate had a private room. On Saturday, August 30, 2003, the couple planned to attend a party at a large house another student had rented. Large numbers of people intended to stay the night, making it a typical big college party. Initially, there was nothing unusual or alarming about the evening. Joe and Katie were thrilled to be together again. Ever since Joe arrived on Friday, August 29, the pair had spent nearly all their time together. They loved each other deeply, cherishing every minute they shared, both physically and emotionally. Around 8 o'clock that evening, Joe, Katie, and her roommate headed to the park. The setting was lively and crowded. People were consuming plenty of beer, dancing, and enjoying themselves. At one point, Joe and Katie became involved in a heated argument. With most of the attendees intoxicated and concentrating on enjoying themselves, no one at the gathering paid much attention to what the disagreement was about. Upset, Katie suddenly decided to leave the house hosting the party and went back to her apartment at 3 in the morning. Nobody tried to prevent her from leaving as she simply walked out. Later, partygoers explained that her belongings were still inside the house, so they assumed she intended to come back and did not realize when she had left. None of her friends offered to accompany her home. By the afternoon of August 31, 2003, the Sepich family received a phone call. When Katie's mother, Jane Sepich, picked up, she heard the worried voice of her daughter's roommate. The caller asked whether Katie had gone to see her family. When Jane said no, her friend explained that Katie had neither returned nor contacted anyone after the party. Jane later remembered experiencing a terrible sense that something awful had happened. Her oldest daughter would never disappear without informing someone. Katie's relatives and friends became so concerned that they immediately contacted police to report the student missing and began searching for her themselves that same day. As night progressed, local police received another call, bringing horrifying news. A group of hunters had found a young woman's body at a municipal landfill near the edge of town. Shocked by what they had encountered, they immediately contacted authorities. The victim lay face down, with her underwear torn and most of her clothing removed. Her jeans had been ripped and pulled down to her ankles. Everything about the scene pointed to a deliberate and brutal assault. Since Katie's missing person report was already recorded, authorities believed the body could be hers, although she carried no identification. The woman's arms and back had suffered extensive burns. Investigators would later determine that the attacker had attempted to eliminate evidence by soaking the body with gasoline and igniting it. The attempt failed. DNA and other crucial forensic evidence remained because the fire quickly went out after only burning the skin. The Sepich family was crushed when authorities contacted them, explaining that a woman's body had been discovered and could possibly be Katie. Katie's father identified the remains. Despite the condition of the body, he immediately recognized his daughter. Any hope that she might still be alive disappeared. An autopsy confirmed what everyone had feared. Katie had endured an extremely violent and vicious assault. Mechanical asphyxiation was determined to be the cause of death. The perpetrator had strangled her with bare hands. Defensive injuries on her arms and body showed that she had fought desperately to stay alive. Investigators also found blood and skin beneath her fingernails, suggesting that she may have scratched her attacker during the struggle. Forensic experts recovered the offender's DNA from biological material collected from the body and beneath her fingernails. After the sample was submitted to the National Criminal Database, investigators found no matches. That indicated the individual had either never previously been arrested for a violent offense or had never been entered into the system. There were no indications of a struggle, no blood evidence, and none of Katie's clothing or shoes at the crime scene, making it clear that the attack had occurred elsewhere. Investigators now needed to determine where the assault happened while narrowing down the list of potential suspects. Katie and her roommate's apartment stood approximately 1.5 miles from the house where the party had taken place. Because Katie had walked home, the journey should have taken roughly half an hour, but investigators needed to know which route she had followed. Detectives decided to search in every direction and locate anyone who might have seen her that night. Unfortunately, no witnesses came forward, and investigators found no clues along the route, likely because Katie had been walking alone through deserted streets during the middle of the night. However, one significant piece of evidence was discovered immediately outside her apartment complex. Her right shoe was found lying beneath the window of her unit, while the other was located closer to the roadside. Katie appeared intoxicated and visibly distressed when she left the party. In her rush, she lost her handbag containing her keys and phone, probably after attempting to climb through her bedroom window when she realized she could not get inside her apartment. That vulnerable moment was when the attacker struck. Medical examiners later discovered tiny fragments of the same gravel embedded in her skin, while evidence of a struggle was found in the gravel beneath the glass. Outdoor security cameras were far less common or reliable in 2003 than they are today. 2 nearby cameras managed to capture several seconds of Katie's walk that night, confirming her general route and direction. But the footage did not help authorities determine who was responsible. Investigators reviewed the surveillance recordings frame by frame. Nothing suspicious appeared anywhere. The absence of useful footage left detectives with little to work from. Every visible moment was checked carefully, yet the recordings offered no clear indication of danger, contact, or pursuit. The limited footage could establish where Katie had been, but it could not show what happened after she moved beyond the cameras. That gap became one of the most frustrating obstacles facing investigators during the early stages of the investigation itself. Katie was not running. No questionable vehicles or individuals were present nearby, and there seemed to be nobody following her. From this, investigators theorized that she encountered her attacker during the final stretch of her walk, a section that unfortunately had no camera coverage whatsoever. Although police interviewed everyone who had attended the party, the last one Katie would ever attend, they could not gather any meaningful information. Most guests had already gone before Katie argued with her boyfriend Joe. When she eventually left, those remaining had either gone to sleep or were far too intoxicated to recall specific details. Some assumed Joe would go after her, while others thought Katie would come back. According to Katie's roommate and close friend, Joe had been drinking heavily and began flirting with another female guest, who then kissed him. Katie saw what happened, and the two immediately became involved in an argument. For nearly 10 minutes, they had an angry and heated confrontation. Eventually, things seemed to calm down, and most people assumed their fight had ended. Yet roughly half an hour later, Katie, who remained visibly upset, decided to leave. She likely expected Joe to come after her. Interestingly, Joe did follow Katie that night, although he soon returned. She had forgotten her purse on the couch, and when he phoned her, he could hear the phone ringing. Strangely, he kept calling her over and over, apparently unaware that the ringtone was coming from beside him. Detectives found this conduct suspicious and chose to bring Joe to the station for a formal interview. His discomfort became even more apparent there. He struggled to provide truthful answers. He said that he had followed Katie to make certain she reached home safely, but somehow lost sight of her. According to him, he reached her building but could not find her, so he returned to the party. When detectives asked why he had not made sure she got inside safely or knocked on her door, he could not offer a convincing explanation. Joe's demeanor shifted after detectives informed him that biological evidence had been recovered from the victim and asked him to voluntarily provide a DNA sample. He refused to answer further questions and immediately asked for an attorney. That reaction only increased investigators' suspicions about him. At that time, law enforcement required a court order before forcing someone to provide a DNA sample, and Joe's attorney worked hard to prevent that from occurring. Detectives therefore had to discover another legal way to obtain the evidence they needed. The night before the incident, Joe and Katie had been physically intimate in her bedroom at the apartment she shared with a roommate, as previously described. Investigators collected the bed linens, hoping they might contain biological evidence that could be useful. Significantly, every other male partygoer cooperated willingly with authorities and agreed to provide DNA samples to clear themselves. The biological material recovered from Katie's body and beneath her fingernails did not correspond with the male DNA found on the bedsheet. After learning this, Joe voluntarily agreed to provide his DNA sample. He later explained that he had initially refused because he feared being falsely connected to the crime. He believed his DNA could still be present and might be misinterpreted because he had been intimate with Katie that night. The brutal killing of a college student in a town once regarded as peaceful quickly became the leading local news story. Rumors spread that a potential serial predator was traveling from state to state, targeting women who were alone at night and carrying out horrific attacks. Investigators recognized the gravity of the situation. They launched an extensive investigation, examining other cases involving similar assaults or attempted attacks. Federal authorities were also asked to compare DNA from unsolved crimes throughout the country. The purpose was to determine whether the individual responsible for Katie's murder had committed comparable offenses before. A search of the national database produced no matches. Meanwhile, fear continued spreading through Las Cruces as the investigation rapidly reached a dead end. Although the school year had only just begun, many young women were afraid to venture out alone, particularly after dark, worried they could become the next victim of a violent offender. With the killer still free, no one in the community truly felt safe. Detectives also considered robbery as a possible motive. Several people who attended the party recalled that Katie had been wearing the diamond engagement ring Joe had given her that night. Yet the ring was neither discovered near the crime scene nor recovered from Katie's body. This strongly suggested that the offender had taken it. Even though no additional crimes occurred, Women throughout the city stopped wearing expensive jewelry in public after the information became known. Hoping to avoid attracting unwanted attention, the community demanded justice for Katie, while tension continued to grip the town. Police searched local pawn shops but found nothing. The missing ring had not been exchanged or sold anywhere in the county. However, tire marks at the landfill near the location where Katie's body was abandoned gave investigators another possible lead. The tread pattern could reveal the tire's make and model. Investigators learned that those tires were commonly found on pickup trucks, but without a license plate, make, or even a color, how could detectives identify one specific vehicle? Once again, the investigation stalled. By early 2004, the inquiry into Katie Sepik's murder had essentially reached a standstill. Then in July, more than a year after her death, authorities learned of an eerily similar incident in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The attack on a young woman there closely echoed the circumstances of Katie's case. After violently assaulting and beating her, the attacker attempted to set her body on fire. Because of these similarities, authorities began to suspect that a serial offender could be responsible. Despite the severity of her injuries, the Green Bay survivor somehow remained alive. When she arrived at the hospital in critical condition, investigators could only hope that she would pull through and eventually be capable of speaking with them. Fortunately, doctors managed to stabilize her quickly, and within days, she was well enough to provide investigators with an account. According to her statement, 2 men of Latino heritage had attacked her. After stealing her luggage, assaulting her, and repeatedly beating her, they began strangling her. It is believed that she lost consciousness, a circumstance that may ultimately have saved her life. Believing she was dead, her attackers attempted to set her body on fire, but the flames went out quickly. Without making sure she was actually dead, they abandoned her. Hours later, she regained consciousness and crawled toward the roadside, where passing motorists eventually noticed her. Her account resulted in composite drawings of both suspects, which were broadcast on the evening news, along with an appeal for the public to help identify the men believed responsible for multiple violent attacks against women. That same evening, a local farmer contacted police. He recognized the men shown in the sketches as Giovanni Niatu and Gregory Morales, 2 seasonal workers he employed. Interestingly, both men were from New Mexico and apparently traveled there from time to visit relatives. It appeared that both violent cases were nearing resolution. Investigators only needed DNA samples from the suspects. But once the 2 men realized police were closing in, they fled. 3 additional months went by before authorities captured them in Atlanta, Georgia. What came next was a major setback for the investigators working Katie's case. Although Morales and Niatu were unquestionably involved in the Green Bay attack, DNA samples collected from them did not match the profile recovered from Katie Sepik's body. The Las Cruces murder was unrelated. Investigators now faced another setback in Katie Sepik's case. Her family refused to allow the story to disappear, even after more than 2 years had gone by. They kept public attention focused on the case and repeatedly reminded the community that a dangerous offender remained free. Then, roughly 3.5 years after the horrific crime, a major breakthrough came in December 2006. The unknown DNA recovered from Katie's body matched a profile that had been entered into the national database. The matching profile belonged to Gabriela Vila, who had previously been convicted of armed robbery, violence against women, and distributing illegal narcotics. Despite having at least 2 serious assault cases in his criminal history, Gabriel had never previously been required to submit a DNA sample, for reasons that remained deeply troubling. In those cases, no one had pushed for additional testing because prosecutors had already established his guilt without forensic evidence. That oversight would have devastating consequences. Astonishingly, just 2 months after Katie's death, Avila had already been arrested after attempting to attack another woman. He had entered her apartment through a window and assaulted her while she slept, unaware that her roommate was also inside. After the 2 women managed to fight him off, they used a phone to lock themselves inside the bathroom and call 911. Despite this, Gabriel avoided severe punishment, and investigators never obtained his DNA at the time. Because of complications surrounding the case and the work of an effective defense attorney, Avila was released on the condition that he remain in town. Predictably, he disappeared soon afterward, and because there was no formal conviction, the case was quietly dropped. Investigators also discovered that Gabriel owned a pickup truck, information that might have proved significant had it been pursued earlier. As fresh momentum developed in the investigation, detectives turned their attention to his former wife, who had been living with him when the murder occurred. She provided valuable information and proved cooperative. Most importantly, she told investigators that she had found an expensive diamond ring inside the glove compartment of his truck. Because the ring did not fit her, she suspected it belonged to another woman, possibly someone Avila had been secretly dating. Planning to confront him about it later, she decided to keep the ring as evidence of his infidelity. Before she had that opportunity, however, Gabriel was arrested and later disappeared again while out on bond. The woman eventually handed the jewelry over to police. It was the very same custom-made engagement ring that Joe had given Katie. The final piece of the mystery had fallen into place. All that remained was convincing the man responsible, who had continued denying any connection to the crime, to finally confess. His demeanor changed immediately when detectives placed the ring before him. Realizing that the evidence had turned against him, he seemed defeated. He had believed the ring was gone forever, and his primary concern became finding out how investigators had recovered it. Once his remaining doubts about their knowledge of his involvement had disappeared, Gabriel Avila eventually decided to tell his version of what happened, hoping to reduce his responsibility and receive a lighter sentence. He said that on that fateful night, he had visited a friend's house to obtain illegal drugs, which he quickly consumed. While returning home, he saw Katie walking alone and offered her a ride. But she refused. Avila claimed that he only wanted to ensure she reached home safely and did not follow her. However, when he saw her trying to enter her apartment through the window, he approached and attacked her. He said that hurting her had not been his original intention and blamed the drugs for impairing his judgment. After the assault, he realized how serious his actions had become. Desperate to conceal his identity, he decided to kill her. Gabriel strangled Katie with his bare hands, placed her body in the bed of his truck, and drove to a landfill outside the city, where he attempted to destroy the evidence by burning her remains. Fearing that she might identify him, he removed the ring from her finger. Not realizing that the fire would barely burn the body and leave most of the forensic evidence intact, he covered Katie with gasoline, ignited it, and walked away. Nearly 4 years after committing the horrific crime, Gabriel Avila finally went on trial in May 2007. He was found guilty of homicide, robbery, assault, battery, and violence. The court sentenced him to 70 years in prison without the possibility of release. But Katie's parents were determined to go further. With strong support from the public, they fought for legislation requiring DNA samples from anyone convicted of, or even arrested for, violent crimes. Had that law existed in 2003, Avila could have been linked to Katie's murder only months after her death, rather than years later. July 2, 2023. Spain's renowned Costa Dorada in the well-known resort town of Salou. Visitors arrive here from across Europe during the summer season each year for sunshine, warm Mediterranean waters, and the opportunity to truly switch off. We're staying at the 4-star Magnolia Hotel, a sophisticated property with one strict policy. Guests have to be adults. No family groups, no children's voices beside the pool. Only spa treatments, a hammam, leisurely cocktails, and complete peace and quiet. It certainly sounds like an ideal place for a romantic escape for two. Yet that Sunday, the peaceful mood within the hotel was abruptly shattered. Guests occupying the same floor started reaching out to staff with complaints. Extremely odd, unusually loud noises were coming from one specific room. At first, it seemed like little more than an intense argument. However, things intensified fast, becoming something that sounded utterly chaotic and seriously disturbing. In a hotel such as this, guests usually avoid interfering in someone else's affairs. Privacy comes with the experience. This time, though, the disruption grew so severe that overlooking it was virtually impossible for everyone staying there that day. Calls to reception grew increasingly frequent. While reviewing the material from this Spanish case, one detail particularly caught my attention: how long a system can sometimes fail to notice obvious warning signs altogether. Back in the corridor of the Magnolia Hotel, the staff failed to react straight away. Several minutes passed, precious time, before the employee on duty reluctantly made his way to the appropriate floor. His task seemed straightforward: issue the noisy guests a firm warning and instruct them to stop disturbing everybody else. He approached the door and knocked. There was no response. The yelling had ceased, as had the sound of movement inside the room. And now, The abrupt silence left the employee considerably more uncomfortable than the noise had only moments before. Suspecting that something could be seriously wrong, the hotel worker pulled out a master electronic key. He tapped the card, rotated the handle, shoved the door inward, and stopped dead in the doorway. What confronted him inside was deeply disturbing. Two individuals were lying on the floor of the expensive hotel room. The woman displayed no signs of life. She was 36-year-old Irish tourist Kirsty Ward. A thick electrical cable from a hair straightener had been wound tightly around her neck several times. Only a few feet away lay a man called Keith Byrne, also an Irish citizen. Unlike Kirsty, he remained alive, but he seemed barely conscious and profoundly confused. His clothing and hands were smeared with blood, and fresh wounds were visible on his wrists. Personal possessions lay scattered throughout the room, while furniture had been knocked from position, obvious evidence that a violent and chaotic confrontation had occurred. Alarmed, the hotel employee immediately contacted emergency services. So, what had actually happened beyond that locked door on a bright Sunday in Spain? Was this the devastating conclusion of some sort of mutual arrangement? Was it a desperate attempt at self-defense that had spiraled beyond control? Or were investigators confronting a deliberate, calculated killing that someone had awkwardly attempted to disguise as something different? The paramedics and local police who reached the hotel still had no idea how complicated the web of deception would become during the following hours. And the answer wasn't actually inside that hotel room. It was concealed within the history of the two people who had stayed there. To understand what brought about the events at that Spanish hotel, we have to travel back several years and return to Ireland. Kirsty Ward resided in Dundrum, a former village that eventually developed into a major Dublin suburb. It's a familiar area, home to one of Europe's biggest shopping centers. But Kirsty herself was far removed from nightlife and glamorous social circles. She was raising her 14-year-old son Evan by herself. Family remained at the heart of her daily life. She was extremely close to her mother, Jackie, her father, John, her sister, Zoe, and her brother Ryan. She was a single mother whose world centered on those closest to her. And eventually, she simply decided she wanted to meet a dependable partner. She needed somebody who understood that her son would always come first. Before long, she encountered someone new. On the surface, he appeared to be an ideal choice for the role of protector. He was roughly Kirsty's age and was likewise raising 3 sons and daughters by himself. But what made him appear particularly trustworthy was his background. He claimed to be a professional soldier, and that wasn't completely fabricated. He genuinely had served in Britain with an elite military unit, the Irish Guards. These are the renowned soldiers wearing tall bearskin hats often seen guarding royal palaces. Beyond that, his military history included legitimate service with the Parachute Regiment, military presence, discipline, and direct experience with the challenges of raising a family. On paper, everything appeared persuasive, and honestly, when I began examining this man myself, I had exactly the same reaction. For a single mother searching for security, it was difficult to picture a more attractive match. But after I began reviewing official records and publicly available documents, that perfect image revealed a serious flaw. There was one thing he had concealed. In 2017, this apparently exemplary guardsman had not departed the military through an honorable retirement whatsoever. He had merely gone absent without authorization. He gathered his personal belongings and silently vanished from his unit without officially seeking discharge. For a serviceman, that represented a serious offense, the sort of choice capable of ending an entire military career. From that moment onward, his own command regarded him as wanted. After abandoning the military, his life moved in a highly questionable direction. The order and discipline of army life gave way to an increasing history of encounters with police. At one point, the former paratrooper was caught draining diesel fuel from other people's parked vehicles. Quite a difference, isn't it? This was scarcely the sort of conduct you would expect from somebody possessing elite military training. It looked more like the conduct of a minor street criminal searching for an effortless way to earn money. Then, hidden within older criminal records, another disturbing detail emerged. When he was younger, the former guardsman had repeatedly found himself in trouble with the law alongside a friend named Calvin Smith. By then, Smith was already very familiar to Irish police. He eventually became involved with a major prohibited substance trafficking organization, served as a professional enforcer, and was arrested in 2017 after an attempted attack on another man. There is no direct evidence within the case record indicating that the two continued communicating as adults. Even so, that history provides a fairly clear picture of the circles the deserter had encountered earlier in his life. On one side stood Kirsty, a quiet woman devoted to her son and her parents. On the other stood a man concealing himself from his military command, carrying links to a troubled past, while portraying himself to others as a respected veteran. These two radically different individuals started forming a relationship that would ultimately take them to that hotel room in Spain. They had met approximately 8 months before the tragedy. Initially, their relationship appeared similar to thousands of others. Mutual attraction, powerful emotions, and the sincere belief that both had finally discovered the right person. Yet that initial excitement vanished remarkably quickly. Their romance soon turned into an emotional roller coaster. Frequent arguments, brief separations, followed by equally passionate reunions became ordinary for them, simply part of their daily routine at that point. And the already fragile situation was continually aggravated by the way they spent their time together. The pair routinely drank significant quantities of strong alcohol and took prohibited substances, including cocaine. Kirsty's family was the first to notice how damaging the relationship between the two of them had become. Her relatives made no secret of their dislike for Keith. They detected something disturbing beneath the surface, a mixture of hostility and instability that left them profoundly uneasy. They noticed Kirsty's behavior changing, yet for much of that period, there was little they could do to affect the decisions she was making about her private life. By summer 2023, the couple decided they needed a different environment. Perhaps some time away could help them resolve their problems and offer their relationship one final opportunity. So they arranged to spend a week beneath the Spanish sunshine. You know, I've examined plenty of cases like this, and I always notice what happens when couples travel together. In a foreign country, sharing the limited confines of a hotel room, you suddenly have very few options for getting away from one another. At home, you can turn around and walk away, stay at a friend's place, or lose yourself in work. But overseas, you tend to see your partner exactly as they really are, without the normal social filters or protective mask. For Keith, the holiday quite probably looked like an opportunity to fix a relationship that was already breaking down. For Kirsty, though, the trip became the final test that revealed precisely where they stood. Shortly before their departure, Kirsty's mother, Jackie, developed a powerful feeling that something was wrong at the time. She couldn't properly explain it at all. While speaking with relatives, she confessed that she hardly recognized her daughter anymore. Kirsty appeared to be living beneath some unseen pressure. Jackie openly described the vacation as a terrible mistake and personally urged her daughter to remain in Ireland. But the tickets were already paid for. The luggage was packed, and the pair once again boarded their flight without delay. After arriving in Salou, relaxation was the last thing they experienced. Instead, every source of friction between them appeared to intensify. The attractive setting of an upscale hotel only highlighted the widening distance between them. Being together nearly around the clock amplified every issue they already faced. And it was there, in Spain, that Kirsty finally recognized the relationship for what it truly was. She understood that they had no future as a couple. She made a definite, carefully thought-out choice to end the destructive relationship permanently. When investigators later inspected her belongings and digital records, they uncovered one vital piece of evidence that would seriously weaken the suspect's later account. Kirsty already possessed a confirmed return ticket to Dublin for Tuesday, July 4th. Put simply, when their confrontation occurred that Sunday, she was already getting ready to leave. She had just 48 hours remaining in Keith's company. Afterward, she intended to board a flight, go back to her family, and begin a new life without him. She showed no indication that she wanted to hurt herself or take her own life. She was planning what would happen next and looking toward the future with confidence. But Kirsty's determined choice to finally leave was what triggered the chain of events that would keep her from ever walking out of that hotel room. We're back inside the hotel room in Solothurn, where police and paramedics have just discovered 2 people lying on the floor. The medical team immediately starts examining them and quickly confirms one critical fact. The man is alive. The wounds on his wrists prove to be entirely superficial. They are bleeding profusely, creating a disturbing sight for anyone who happens to witness it, but they are not dangerous to his life whatsoever. To investigators, the injuries appear to be a crude effort to create the impression that he had attempted to hurt himself. The suspect is taken urgently to a local hospital under police guard, where doctors promptly treat his injuries. Once they have been bandaged and the basic medical treatment is finished, officers put him into a police vehicle and transport him straight to the station for his first official statement. During questioning, the former soldier seems composed and presents investigators with an account that, at least superficially, sounds carefully prepared. He says Kirsty had completely lost control after taking prohibited substances and alcohol. According to him, she had behaved in a frightening and irrational manner that night. He literally told investigators that during only a few hours, she appeared to show 4 entirely different personalities by then. Keith maintains that the pair became caught in an intense verbal dispute. In his account, he decided the best way to prevent the situation from worsening was to leave the hotel temporarily, get some fresh air, and calm himself down. Then, he says, after returning to the room, he encountered a horrifying scene in the room. According to Keith, she had taken her own life while he was gone, using the hotel room door handle. Now, tell me, how often do you accept coincidences like that when the sole witness happens to walk outside at precisely the moment something terrible takes place? At first, whenever I read statements like this, one detail immediately stands out: how rapidly the suspect attempts to place all the blame on the victim's mental condition. Kirsty's family immediately dismissed that convenient, carefully crafted account of what happened, and they offered investigators one compelling logical reason for doing so. No farewell note was found anywhere inside the hotel room. For a mother entirely devoted to her teenage son, the thought that she would simply vanish from his life without leaving even a brief message on her phone made no sense whatsoever to her family. There was another factor. Kirsty's medical records contained no history of psychiatric diagnoses or earlier episodes of depression. Several weeks after the suspect was placed in pretrial detention, something occurred that seemed almost impossible under those conditions. Although he was being kept under strict supervision, Keith somehow obtained access to a smartphone connected to the internet. Inside his cell, he recorded a selfie video and sent it to people he knew. Soon afterward, the footage entered the public domain, and what Keith said in that recording caused widespread shock. In that video, the man seated before the camera doesn't appear to be someone crushed by the death of a partner. Keith seems entirely composed, even cheerful. Smiling broadly, he discusses everyday life behind bars as though he were staying at a resort, openly complimenting the conditions inside the facility. But the most unsettling detail is how he speaks about Kirsty. When he refers to her in the recording, he simply calls her that girl. No name, no apparent grief. He speaks about her with total emotional detachment, almost as though she were a stranger he had merely encountered inside the hotel room. For Kirsty's family, the video felt like a slap across the face. And for investigators, it became another strong reason to believe the survivor's version simply did not reflect reality. Now it was time for the physical evidence to speak. Forensic experts in Spain launched a thorough examination of the evidence, and their conclusions quickly tore apart the former soldier's carefully prepared account. The injury pattern did not support his claim that Kirsty had taken her own life. In the kind of scenario Keith described, the mark around the neck would usually follow a distinctive upward angle. Instead, specialists discovered something entirely different. The mark across Kirsty's neck ran horizontally, while the particular internal injuries around her throat pointed to powerful external pressure. Evidence indicated that someone had come up behind her, positioned the cord around her neck, and pulled it tight with significant force. The biomechanics of those injuries were incompatible with Kirsty having inflicted them on herself. Then investigators received results from an expanded toxicology examination, eliminating what little uncertainty remained. Laboratory analysis revealed a critically high concentration of cocaine in Kirsty's system, combined with an extremely large quantity of hard liquor. At those levels, her body would have been under intense strain. Coordination would be badly impaired, and a person could be nearing unconsciousness. According to the medical findings, performing deliberate, physically demanding actions to take her own life would have been virtually impossible in that state. But the implications were even more disturbing. That degree of physical and chemical impairment would also have made any meaningful self-defense extremely difficult. Kirsty would have possessed almost no ability to resist a sudden attack. Whenever I examine investigations like this, I keep asking myself the same thing. Do criminals today truly believe they can somehow outsmart microscopes and laboratory equipment? Science doesn't care how charismatic a suspect seems, or how disciplined he appears because of his military background. forensic evidence carries no personal bias. And when direct witnesses are absent, it can be exactly what investigators require to break through a dead end. Why do you think offenders continue making the same mistake and underestimate what modern forensic laboratories can reveal? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm always interested in reading your analysis beneath these videos. As soon as reports of the Irishman's arrest began appearing across European media, the investigation took an unexpected direction and stretched far beyond Spain's Mediterranean coast. People from the suspect's past voluntarily reached out to law enforcement. 2 former girlfriends came forward to provide official statements to investigators. What emerged was a troubling and remarkably consistent pattern. For many years, this man appeared to repeat the same troubling pattern in his relationships. Isolating a partner, exercising severe psychological control, eroding her independence, and eventually escalating toward uncontrolled physical violence. One of the women made the extraordinarily difficult personal choice to speak publicly about her experience, providing investigators with the vital and previously missing piece of the puzzle they needed. In her statement, she recounted suffering an almost identical assault in the past. During a domestic argument, the former paratrooper had seized her around the neck and restricted her ability to breathe. She survived solely because other people happened to step in at exactly the right moment. Witnesses physically compelled the attacker to let her go. That testimony completely and fundamentally altered how investigators understood the suspect at that stage. Police no longer had merely a possible motive. They now possessed a documented history of strikingly similar conduct. At last, the scattered evidence was finally starting to connect, giving investigators what they required to reconstruct events inside the hotel. The physical evidence ultimately offered investigators a far clearer picture of how the confrontation that alarmed neighboring guests had started. That Sunday morning, Kirsty told Keith plainly about the final decision she had made the previous day. She told him their relationship had ended, and that Tuesday she would travel back to Dublin alone. For a man used to controlling a relationship and retaining total power, losing that control was devastating. The loud, heated argument overheard by other hotel guests wasn't simply another dispute between a couple. It reflected his fury as he realized his hold over Kirsty was disappearing. Once the shouting ended and the room abruptly fell silent, what followed was no longer an argument. Understanding that words were failing, Keith resorted to the same form of physical domination that had surfaced in his earlier relationship. This time, though, the ultimate result was fatal. Immediately afterward, his instinct for self-preservation took control. Based on the later reconstruction of events, he started preparing the scene for police. He deliberately shifted furniture, staged an appearance of disorder, and inflicted superficial wounds on himself, intended to strongly reinforce an alternative account of what had occurred. It was a deliberate effort to build a believable story around one basic fact. Kirsty could no longer explain to investigators what had actually happened. The trial itself opened 2 years later in July 2025. Proceedings were held in Spain before a specialized court handling crimes against women. In the defendant's seat sat a man whose confidence seemed completely undiminished despite his time in custody. Keith attempted to shape the jury's impression of him. He portrayed himself publicly as a devoted father and repeatedly stressed that he had no previous official convictions for violent conduct. Then came his final statement. In an especially cynical speech, Keith insisted that he was the person who should be regarded as the victim. He claimed that before leaving the hotel room, he had kissed Kirsty, told her he would love her forever, and reassured her that none of what happened was her fault. Under Spanish law, the injured party may appoint a private prosecutor to participate in the proceedings. The state prosecutor sought a 20-year prison sentence. The private prosecutor representing Kirsty's grieving family requested 30 years. The defense called for a complete acquittal. The jury ultimately rejected Keith's performance. They swiftly and unanimously found the Irishman guilty of deliberately taking Kirsty's life. The pattern was now established. His responsibility was clearly proven. Everyone anticipated a harsh sentence from the female judge presiding over the tribunal. But then something happened that Kirsty's family could scarcely believe. The judge gave Keith just 15 years in prison. That was precisely half the sentence Kirsty's family had requested. And the reasoning behind that decision left her relatives stunned. The court ultimately decided that Keith's voluntary consumption of cocaine and alcohol before the crime counted as a mitigating factor. The reasoning was that his intoxication had impaired his cognitive abilities, meaning he was not completely able to understand the consequences of his actions. I have to admit, this legal paradox is extremely difficult to grasp. A person willingly consumes prohibited stimulants and alcohol, carries out an extremely aggressive, deliberate attack from behind, and then attempts to manipulate the evidence afterward. Yet somehow that same impaired condition becomes the reason he avoids the maximum punishment. Shouldn't deliberately placing yourself in that condition be regarded as something that makes an offender more dangerous, rather than something that lessens his responsibility? What do you think about that reasoning? I genuinely enjoy reading your thoughts about this legal contradiction in the comments. For Kirsty's family, the final outcome was another devastating blow. In their view, they had endured an entire court process only to watch the justice system effectively reduce the aggressor's sentence because of his own destructive substance use. Kirsty's parents assumed full responsibility for raising 14-year-old Evan. They decided to surround him with the same unconditional support his mother had always provided. Their primary goal was very straightforward. They would not let what happened in Spain define or destroy Evan's future. And with that, the Magnolia Hotel case comes to an end. The story of how Kirsty's desperate attempt to finally escape became a trap from which she would never escape.